Chapter 11. In the night I heard Aesop get up from his corner and growl. I heard it through my sleep, but I was dreaming just then of shooting. The growl of the dog fitted into the dream, and it did not wake me quite. When I stepped out of the hunt the next morning, there were tracks in the grass, a pair of human feet. Someone had been there, had gone first to one of my windows, then to the other. The tracks were lost again down on the road. She came toward me with hot cheeks, with a face all beaming. "Have you been waiting?" she said. "I was afraid you would have to wait." I had not been waiting. She was on the way before me. "Have you slept well?" I asked. I hardly knew what to say. "No, I haven't. I've been awake," she answered, and she told me she had not slept that night, but had sat in a chair with her eyes closed, and she had been out of the house for a little walk. "Someone was outside my hut last night," I said. "I saw tracks in the grass this morning." And her face colored. She took my hand there, on the road, and made no answer. I looked at her and said, "Was it you, I wonder?" "Yes," she answered, pressing close to me. "It was I. I hope I didn't wake you." I stepped as quietly as I could. "Yes, it was I. I was near you again. I am fond of you." Chapter 12. Every day I met her. I will tell the truth, I was glad to meet her. My heart flew. It is 2 years ago this year. Now I think of it only when I please. The whole story just amuses me and distracts me. And as for the 2 green feathers, I will tell you about them in good time. There were several places where we could meet, at the mill, on the road, even in my hut. She came wherever I would. "Good dag," she cried, always first, and I answered, "Good dag." "You are happy today," she says, and her eyes sparkle. "Yes, I am happy," I answer. "There is a speck there on your shoulder. It is dust. Perhaps a speck of mud from the road. I must kiss that little spot." "No, let me, I will. Everything about you stirs me so. I am half out of my senses. I did not sleep last night." And that was true. Many a night I lay and could not sleep. We walked side by side along the road. What do you think? Am I as you like me to be? She asks. Perhaps I talk too much. No? Oh, but you must say what you really think. Sometimes I think to myself this can never come to any good. "What can never come to any good?" I ask. "This between us. That it cannot come to any good. You may believe it or not, but I am shivering now with cold. I feel icy cold the moment I come to you, just out of happiness." "It is the same with me," I answer. "I feel a shiver too when I see you, but it will come to some good all the same. And anyhow, let me pat you on the back to warm you." And she lets me, half unwillingly, and then I hit a little harder for a jest and laugh and ask if that doesn't make her feel better. "Oh, please, don't when I ask you. Please," she says. Those few words. There was something so helpless about her saying it so the wrong way round. "Please don't when I ask you." When we went on along the road again, she was displeased with me for my jest, I wondered, and thought to myself, well, let us see. And I said, "I just happened to think of something. Once, when I was out on a sledge party, there was a young lady who took a silk kerchief from her neck and fastened it round mine. In the evening I said to her, 'You shall have your kerchief again tomorrow. I will have it washed.' 'No,' she said, 'give it to me now. I will keep it just as it is, after you have worn it.' And I gave it to her. 3 years after, I met the same young lady again. 'The kerchief?' I said, and she brought it out. It lay in a paper, just as before. I saw it myself." Edwarda glanced up at me. "Yes? And what then?" "That is all," I said. There was nothing more, but I thought it was nice of her. Pause. Where is that lady now? Abroad. We spoke no more of that. But when it was time for her to go home, she said, "Well, good night. But you won't go thinking of that lady anymore, will you?" "I don't think of anyone but you." I believed her. I saw that she meant what she said, and it was more than enough for me that she thought of no one else. I walked after her. "Thank you, Eduarda," I said. And then I added with all my heart, "You are all too good for me, but I am thankful that you will have me. God will reward you for that. I'm not so fine as many you could have, no doubt, but I am all yours, so endlessly yours, by my eternal soul." "What are you thinking of now, to bring tears to your eyes?" "It was nothing," she answered. "It sounded so strange, that God would reward me for that. You say things that I love you so." And all at once she threw her arms round my neck, there in the middle of the road, and kissed me. When she had gone, I stepped aside into the woods to hide, to be alone with my happiness, and then I hurried eagerly back to the road to see if anyone had noticed that I had gone in there, but I saw no one. Chapter 13. Summer nights and still water, and the woods endlessly still. No cry, no footsteps from the road. My heart seemed full as with dark wine. Moths and night flies came flying noiselessly in through my window, lured by the glow from the hearth and the smell of the bird I had just cooked. They dashed against the roof with a dull sound, fluttered past my ears, sending a cold shiver through me, and settled on my white powder horn on the wall. I watched them. They sat trembling and looked at me. Moths and spinners and burrowing things. Some of them looked like pansies on the wing. I stepped outside the hut and listened. Nothing. No noise. All was asleep. The air was alight with flying insects, myriads of buzzing wings. Out at the edge of the wood were ferns and aconite. The trailing arbutus was in bloom, and I loved its tiny flowers. Thanks, my God, for every heather bloom I have ever seen. They have been like small roses on my way, and I weep for love of them. Somewhere near were wild carnations. I could not see them, but I could mark their scent. But now in the night hours, great white flowers have opened suddenly. Their chalices are spread wide. They are breathing, and furry twilight moths slip down into their petals, making the whole plant quiver. I go from one flower to another. They are drunken flowers. I mark the stages of their intoxication. Light footsteps, a human breathing, a happy "good afternoon," and I answer and throw myself down on the road. "Good afternoon, Eduarda," I say again, worn out with joy that you should care for me so, she whispers, and I answered her, "If you knew how grateful I can be. You are mine, and my heart lies still within me all the day, thinking of you. You are the loveliest girl on earth, and I have kissed you. Often I go red with joy, only to think that I have kissed you." "Why are you so fond of me this evening?" she asks. I was that for endless reasons. I needed only to think of her to feel so. That look of hers from under the high arched brows, and her rich dark skin. Should I not be fond of you? I say again. I thank every tree in my path, because you are well and strong. Once at a dance there was a young lady who sat out dance after dance, and they let her sit there alone. I didn't know her, but her face touched me, and I bowed to her. Well, but no. She shook her head. Should she not dance, I asked her. "Can you imagine it?" she said. "My father was a handsome man, and my mother a perfect beauty, and my Father worn her by storm, but I was born lame. Edwarda looked at me. "Let us sit down," she said, and we sat down in the heather. "Do you know what my friend says about you?" she began. "Your eyes are like an animal's," she says, "and when you look at her, it makes her mad. It's just as if you touched her," she says. A strange joy thrilled me when I heard that, not for my own sake, but for Edwarda's, and I thought to myself, "There's only one whom I care for. What does that one say of the look in my eyes?" And I asked her, "Who was that? Your friend?" "I will not tell you," she said, "but it was one of those that were out on the island that day." "Very well, then." And then we spoke of other things. "My father is going to Russia in a few days," she said. "I am going to have a party. Have you been out to Korholmy? We must have 2 hampers of wine. The ladies from the vicarage are coming again, and father has already given me the wine. And you won't look at her again, will you? My friend, I mean. Please, you won't, will you? Or I shall not ask her at all." And with no more words, she threw herself passionately about my neck and looked at me, gazing into my face and breathing heavily. Her glance was sheer blackness. I got up abruptly, and in my confusion could only say, "So your father is going to Russia?" "What did you get up like that for so quickly?" she asked. "Because it's late, Edwarda," I said. "Now the white flowers are closing again. The sun is getting up. It will soon be day." I went with her through the woodland and stood watching her as long as I could. Far down, she turned round and softly called good night. Then she disappeared. At the same moment, the door of the blacksmith's house opened. A man with a white shirt front came out, looked round, pulled his hat down farther over his forehead, and took the road down to Surland. Edwarda's good night was still in my ears. Chapter 14. A man can be drunk with joy. I fire off my gun, and an unforgettable echo answers from hill to hill, floats out over the sea, and rings in some sleepy helmsman's ears. And what have I to be joyful about? A thought that came to me, a memory, a sound in the woods, a human being. I think of her. I close my eyes and stand still there on the road and think of her. I count the minutes. Now I am thirsty and drink from the stream. Now I walk 100 paces forward and 100 paces back. It must be late by now, I say to myself. Can there be anything wrong? A month has passed, and a month is no long time. There is nothing wrong. Heaven knows this month has been short, but the nights are often long, and I am driven to wet my cap in the stream and let it dry, only to pass the time while I'm waiting. I reckoned my time by nights. Sometimes there would be an evening when Edwarda did not come. Once she stayed away 2 evenings. Nothing wrong? No, I felt then that perhaps my happiness had reached and passed its height. And had it not? Can you hear Edwarda? How restless it is in the woods tonight? Rustling insistently in the undergrowth? And the big leaves trembling. Something's brewing, maybe. But it was not that I had in mind to say. I hear a bird away up on the hill, only a tomtit, but it had sat there calling in the same place 2 nights now. Can you hear? The same note again. Yes, I hear it. Why do you ask me that? Oh, for no reason at all. It's been there 2 nights now. That was all. Thanks for coming this evening, love. I sat here, expecting you this evening, or the next, looking forward to it when you came. And I have been waiting too. I think of you, and I have picked up the pieces of the glass you upset once, and I kept them. Do you remember? Father went away last night. I could not come. There was so much to do with packing and reminding him of things. I knew you were waiting here in the woods, and I cried and went on packing. But it is 2 evenings, I thought to myself. What was she doing the first evening, and why is there less joy in her eyes now than before? An hour passed. The bird up in the hills was silent. The woods lay dead. No, no, nothing wrong. All as before. She gave me her hand to say good night and looked at me with love in her eyes. Tomorrow? I said. No, not tomorrow, she answered. I did not ask her why. Tomorrow is our party, she said with a laugh. I was only going to surprise you, but you looked so miserable. I had to tell you at once. I was going to send you an invitation, all on paper, and my heart was lightened unspeakably. She went off, nodding farewell. One more thing, said I, standing where I was. How long is it since you gathered up the pieces of that glass and put them away? Why, a week ago, perhaps, or a fortnight. Yes, perhaps a fortnight. But why do you ask? Well, I will tell you the truth. It was yesterday. Yesterday? No longer ago than yesterday, she had thought of me. All was well again now. Chapter 15. The two boats lay ready and we stepped on board, talking and singing. The place, Cullamerny, lay out beyond the islands. It took a good while to row across, and on the way we talked, one party with another, from boat to boat. The doctor wore light things as the ladies did. I had never seen him so pleased before. He talked with the rest, instead of listening in silence. I had an idea he had been drinking a little, and so was in good humor today. When we landed, he craved the attention of the party for a moment and bade us welcome. I thought to myself, this means that Eduarda has asked him to act as host. He fell to entertaining the ladies in the most amiable manner. To Eduarda he was polite and kind, often fatherly, and pedantically instructive, as he had been so many times before. She spoke of some date or other, saying I was born in 38, and he asked, 1838, I suppose you mean? And if she answered, no, in 1938, he would have shown no embarrassment, but only corrected her again and said, I think you must be mistaken. When I said anything myself, he listened politely and attentively and did not ignore me. A young girl came up to me with a greeting. I did not recognize her. I could not remember her at all, and I said a few words in surprise, and she left. It was one of the dean's daughters. I had met her the day we went to the island before, and I had invited her to my hut. We talked together a little. An hour or so passed by. I was feeling dull and drank from the wine poured out for me, and mixed with the others, chatting with them all. Again I made a mistake here and there. I was on doubtful ground, and could not tell at the moment how to answer any little civility. Now and then I talked incoherently, or even found nothing at all to say, and this troubled me. Over by the big rock, which we were using as a table, sat the doctor, gesticulating. Soul, what is a soul? He was saying. The dean's daughter had accused him of being a free-thinker. Well, and should not a man think freely? People imagined hell as a sort of house down under the ground, with the devil as host, or rather as sovereign lord. Then he spoke of the altar picture in the chapel, a figure of the Christ with a few Jews and Jewesses water into wine. Well and good, but Christ had a halo round his head, and what was a halo? Simply a yellow hoop fixed on 3 hairs. 2 of the ladies clasped their hands aghast, but the doctor extricated himself and said jestingly, sounds horrible, doesn't it? I admit it. But if you repeat it and repeat it again to yourself 7 or 8 times, and then you think it over a little, it soon sounds easier. Ladies, your very good health. And he knelt on the grass before the two ladies, and instead of taking his hat off and laying it before him, he held it straight up in the air with one hand and emptied his glass with his head bent back. I was altogether carried away by his wonderful ease of manner, and would have drunk with him myself, but that his glass was empty. Edwarda was following him with her eyes. I placed myself near her and said, "Shall we play Anki today?" She stared slightly and got up. "Be careful not to say do to each other now," she whispered. Now I had not said do at all. I walked away. Another hour passed. The day was getting long. I would have rowed home alone long before if there had been a third boat. Aesop lay tied up in the hut, and perhaps he was thinking of me. Edwarda's thoughts must surely be far away from me. She talked of how lovely it would be to travel and to see strange places. Her cheeks flushed as she thought, and she even stumbled in her speech. No one could be more happier than I today. "More happier," said the doctor. "What?" said she. "More happier? I don't understand. You said more happier, I think." "Did I? I'm sorry. No one could be happier than I the day I stood on board ship. Sometimes I long for places I do not know myself." She longed to be away. She did not think of me. I stood there and read in her face that she had forgotten me. Well, there was nothing to be said, but I stood there myself and saw it in her face, and the minutes dragged so miserably, slowly by. I asked several of the others if we ought not to row back now. It was getting late, I said, and Aesop was tied up in the hut, but none of them wanted to go back. I went over again to the dean's daughter for the third time. I thought she must be the one that had said I had eyes like an animal's. We drank together. She had quivering eyes. They were never still. She kept looking at me and then looking away all the time. "Fröken," I said, "do you not think people here in these parts are like the short summer itself? In their feeling, I mean. Beautiful, but lasting only a little while." I spoke loudly, very loudly, and I did so on purpose. And I went on speaking loudly, and I asked that young lady once more if she would not like to come up one day and see my hut. "Heaven bless you for it," I said in my distress, and I was already thinking to myself how perhaps I might find something to give her as a present if she came. Perhaps I had nothing to give her but my powder horn, I thought, and she promised to come. Edwarda sat with her face turned away and let me talk as much as I pleased. She listened to what the others said, putting in a word herself now and again. The doctor told the young ladies fortunes by their hands and talked a lot. He himself had small, delicate hands with a ring on one finger. I felt myself unwanted and sat down by myself a while on a stone. It was getting late in the afternoon. "Here I am," I said to myself, "sitting all alone on a stone, and the only creature that could make me move, she lets me sit. Well then, I care no more than she." A great feeling of forsakenness came over me. I could hear them talking behind me, and I heard how Edwarda laughed, and at that I got up suddenly and went over to the party. My excitement ran away with me. "Just a moment," I said. "It occurred to me a little while that I was sitting there. Perhaps you might like to see my fly book." And I took it out. "I am sorry I did not think of it before. I just look through it, if you please." "I should be only too delighted. You must all see it. There are both red and yellow flies in it." And I held my cap in my hand and I spoke. I was myself aware that I had taken off my cap, and I knew that this was wrong, so I put it on once again. There was a deep silence for a moment, and no one offered to take the book. At last the doctor reached out his hand for it and said politely, "Thanks very much. Let's look at the things. It's always been a marvel to me how those flies were put together." "I make them myself," I said, full of gratitude, and I went on at once to explain how it was done. It was simple enough. I bought the feathers and the hooks, They were not well made, but they were only for my own use. One could get ready-made flies in the shops, and they were beautiful things. Edwarda cast one careless glance at me and my book, and went on talking with her girlfriends. Here are some of the feathers," said the doctor. "Look, these are really fine." Edwarda looked up. "The green ones are pretty," she said. "Let me look, doctor." "Keep them," I cried. "Yes, do. I beg you now. 2 green feathers. Do as a kindness. Let them be a keepsake." She looked at them and said, "They are green and gold, as you turn them in the sun. Thank you, if you will give them to me." "I should be glad to," I said, and she took the feathers. A little later the doctor handed me the book and thanked me. Then he got up and asked if it were not nearly time to be getting back. I said yes, for heaven's sake. I have a dog tied up at home. Look you, I have a dog, and he's my friend. He lies there thinking of me, and when I come home he stands with his forepaws at the window to greet me. It has been a lovely day, and now it's nearly over. Let us go back. I am grateful to you all. I waited on the shore to see which boat Edwarda chose, and made up my mind to go on the other one myself. Suddenly she called me. I looked at her in surprise. Her face was flushed. Then she came up to me, held out her hand, and said tenderly, "Thank you for the feathers. You will come in the boat with me, won't you?" "If you wish it," I said. We got into the boat, and she sat down beside me on the same seat, her knee touching mine. I looked at her, and she glanced at me for a moment in return. I began to feel myself repaid for that bitter day, and was growing happy again, when she suddenly changed her position, turned her back to me, and began talking to the doctor, who was sitting at the rudder. For a full quarter of an hour I did not exist for her. Then I did something I repent of, and I have not yet forgotten. Her shoe fell off. I snatched it up and flung it far out into the water, for pure joy that she was near, or for some impulse to make myself remarked, to remind her of my existence. I do not know. It all happened so suddenly. I did not think, only felt that impulse. The lady set up a cry. I myself was as if paralyzed by what I had done. But what was the good of that? It was done. The doctor came to my help. He cried, "Row," and he steered toward the shoe, and the next moment the boatman had caught hold of the shoe just as it had filled with water and was sinking. The man's arm was wet up to the elbow. Then there was a shout of hurrah from many of the boats, because the shoe was saved. I was deeply ashamed, and felt that my face changed color and winced as I wiped the shoe with my handkerchief. Edwarda took it without a word. Not till a little while after did she say, "I never saw such a thing." "No, did you ever?" I said, and I smiled and pulled myself together, making as if I had played that trick for some particular reason, as if there was something behind it. But what could there be? The doctor looked at me for the first time contemptuously. A little time passed. The boats glided homeward. The feeling of awkwardness among the party disappeared. We sang. We were nearing the land. Edwarda said, "Oh, we haven't finished the wine. There is ever so much left. We must have another party. A new party later on. We must have a dance, a ball in this big room." When we went ashore, I made an apology to Edwarda. "If you knew how I wished myself back in my hut," I said. "This has been a long and painful day." "Has it been a painful day for you, Lieutenant?" I said, trying to pass it off. I have caused unpleasantness both to myself and others. I threw your shoe in the water. Yes, an extraordinary thing to do. Forgive me," I said.